Hello, Neural Network listeners. This is your co-host, Arman Priyadarshan speaking. Vasu couldn't make it today because he's on his way to Pennsylvania. We will be joined by our guest co-host, Omkar Badi.
Thank you, Armand. I'm a rising senior at St. John's High School, fascinated by robotics and public policy and the intersection between foreign relations and the ever-expanding field of technology. I am so excited for today's show. And with us today is a special guest who's associate professor from UCLA and an Amazon scholar at Alexa AI, Dr. Kai-Wei Chang. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Chang. Would you like to introduce yourself to the listeners?
Yeah, sure. So I'm an associate professor at the UCLA. So I lead a natural language processing group, and our research is focused on two main directions. So one direction is a multimodal model. So we attempt to combine large language model with computer vision model or code generation model in order to perform some real world tasks. And the other direction is trustworthy AI. So we have been working on a bunch of directions that making the large language model more inclusive, more fair, more robust, and more explainable. Yeah, so this is a kind of a two main direction in our labs.
Sounds cool. Could you talk about what motivated you to pursue your main research interests?
Yeah, so I think the main motivation is that, as you may know, that large language model has been widely used in many real-world applications. So I think this is a time like 1920s that when the airplane actually put into the commercial use. So you can see that people start to building the airplane that can fly longer, faster, and can carry more people, right? So you see a lot of these kind of use case in AI nowadays too. So you see a lot of startup, a lot of company now they focus on AI and their applications. But if you're thinking about the airline history, right? So from 1920 to nowadays, the biggest difference is safety, right? So you just not just putting people on the sky, you need to make sure they can landing safely. So similarly, for the AI usage, that although we have a lot of good use nowadays, but it is also important to make sure the model don't cause some harm, right? So the safety robustness will be super important. And you can see that in many applications, for example, that self-driving car, safety definitely will be like one of the top priority. But also in some other use case, for example, the chatbot, right, or the test bot, you also want to make sure the model to generate some results that causing some harm, also causing some PR issue, right? So you probably see a lot of the cases people is reporting. For example, the model generate some stereotypical output that may causing some harmful certain minority, right? And you also see cases people report the model making some mistake, right? And then or give some, for example, suggestion for the healthcare, and but it probably not a good suggestion. Can really help the people. So there will be a lot of this kind of issue happening today, but also we're going to happen more in the future. So that's kind of the motivation of our research.
Yeah, that's really interesting. What are some potential consequences that can arise with AI and its implementation in these cases? And what are some preventative measures that developers are taking to ensure that we limit these mistakes?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. So the potential harm can come from many places, right? So one particular one could be a harm to the minority. That's one thing that the current model, if you see how they train it, is majorly based on the data they collect from the internet. So those data are mostly created by a certain group of people, like for example, younger folks or people with certain race or gender, right? So then they doesn't really carry all the different perspective of people. And we kind of building just one big large language model in the sense that we're trying to build a smartest person in some sense, and then that the person to decide everything. But that's definitely not the way that our society works, right? So we want to make sure that there are enough diversity or enough diversity of opinion that carried by the model that can actually represent all different people. So that's one of the problem that we see the current large language model because that it only generate kind of one kind of opinions, and the opinion could be also biased or only favor certain group of people. So we want to on one hand make sure the model can generate diverse opinions, and then also doesn't carry the bias. So that's one thing. And the other would be more on the safety side, that the model is very useful. So you can ask any question, the model can attempt to answer your question, but that come out with two potential bad scenario. So one is the model could hallucinate in the sense that the model can just make up something, right? So if you ask them some medical advice and the model give you incorrect answer, that definitely would be a big issue. On the other side, the model can be too smart in the sense that it can suggest you to perform something bad that you don't know, right? So for example, if you ask the model to help you to create a nuclear bomb, right? Currently the model cannot do that for sure, but that it can also help you to create something maybe less harmful but still dangerous, right? So if we suggest you to do some chemical experiments, but it's dangerous, and then your house got fired, right? And then who are going to take the responsibility for the model to make such a suggestion? Yeah, so this kind of two things that definitely we need to have some way to ensure a model to know what it can answer, what it cannot. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a great point. Just a couple of weeks back, we talked to Professor Yair Zik from UMass, and we talked a lot about like fairness as well as like hallucinations and AI with him as well. He provided like the analogy in the case of like AI being used to determine whether like someone requesting a loan should actually receive it. And then if it says like yes or no, how would you provide like an explanation for why or why not they should receive that loan or not? And it presents like a very interesting like ethical question. And I think like your research, it kind of goes a lot into like fairness and ethical considerations as well. And that's like explainable AI in general is like a very, very cool field. And I think your research is quite cool. And building off of that, I guess like I wanted to kind of ask, what would you consider like a fair natural language processing model?
Yeah, this is a very good question. So people cannot agree with what is fair even for the human society. So I don't think I have a good definition what is fair or the best kind of a language model. But as a computer scientist like me, the way we can do is to control the model, so then we can ask the model to follow the definition that social science or the society agree on what is fair and what is a good output, right? And then it can be application oriented, because like for example for the loan application that you mentioned, right, they have their industrial standard, what is a fair and what is the way that they give people loan. Or if in another sensitive cases like hiring, right, so the school has some policy and also have a general guideline to say what is a fair and what is the way that we should interview the candidate. So what bothers me now is not that the model can just generate a fair or good output, but it's like the model don't really like a human. You can tell them or give them a guideline or send them to the workshop to learn what is a fair in the definition for that specific application, right? So imagine that if we want to make sure the people in the hiring committee is fair, what we do is that we give them guideline, we give them policy. They're going to go to a workshop, right? And then need to go to some training. And then after that, assume that person understand what is fair in that scenario, and then they can make the good decision. So the question for me is that how can we mimic this kind of pipeline and then generate, this produce this kind of process that we can teach the model.
It's a great response. It kind of like makes me think about like one aspect of it, as you mentioned with the pipeline, is like the AI would kind of have to understand like how like society portrays ethics. And I think like an interesting part of that is kind of the more black box effect with language models. It kind of raises a question of how you would understand what the AI is learning and how it's processing it. And I think like that also kind of ties into explainability. And I think like maybe if you could like talk about potentially like counterfactual explanations or just like any way like we can understand how like LLMs think and how to kind of like how they process things, that would be cool.
Yes, I think that's a definitely very important direction. And also this is a kind of a direction we are thinking of how we can make the model better in terms of safety and fairness. Yeah, so I can talk about one of our recent projects that we just put on archive. So you may heard earlier Google Gemini has this issue that they generate a historical you know uh, image to describe the event, right? And then they're trying to make the model more fair, more inclusive. So when you ask the model to generate a doctor or a nurse, it would try to generate more diverse gender distribution, race distribution. So it would not, be yeah, it would be inclusive. But on the other hand, that approach causing the problems that if you ask the model to generate the set of the founding fathers of the US, right, and the model now generate a bunch of people with a gender or race not aligned with the actual, the founding father of the USA. So that was the issue, and the issue causing by if you just prompt the model to say, I just want to get a more fair output, right? And the model don't really understand what is a fairness in that context. So then the model trying to diversify and then it causing the problem. So along with what you say, the right solution we're thinking of is that you need to let the model to thinking about the whole things, right? You need to let the model first as a model to thinking of what is a race and gender distribution for, the US founding father in the 80th and 19th century, right? So basically the model need to thinking about that. And then based on that, and then you will be able to generate the description. And then based on the description, you generate an image. And because of this thinking process, you know what the model is thinking, right? And you know what the model knows and what the model doesn't know. And then based on that, then you can actually much better reflect the historical scenario. So explainability can come from many places in this pipeline. So first, the knowledge, what knowledge the model know and what the model doesn't know is one of the main aspect that we want to let the model to tell you. It's like you teach a kids, right? You also not just ask a kids to give you the final answer, but tell me what is your thinking process, and from there I can see what is the problem. So that's one, and the other is how model really confidence on their final generation aspect, right? So we see in many cases the model don't know the answer, you're just trying to guess the answer, right? This is what we do when we take the exam, right? If we don't know the answer and then we're just trying to guess one. But you want to the model also know that, we want to also know that if a model really know the answer, you're just making a guess. Yeah, and we also have some research recently to show that you can actually, based on the internal state of the model, to tell the difference if the model really know the answer or if the model just making a guess. So that is the second aspect, that basically uncertainty measurement. So if the model know or doesn't know the answer. And the third aspect would be that can the model actually go back to the corpus they train on, or go back to some references to tell you that what this knowledge come from, right? So it's like if you want to convince people, I give you the answer, I will actually show you the sources, right? And we show you that this argument is come from these and these sources, so you can verify if those sources is really justify, or is the source can be also have mistake, or maybe can be something adversarial. So that's the third aspect I think is important, is that the model need to give you a reference and cite how those knowledge come from, right? So then from there you can also know why the model make all these decisions, right? So for example, if you make a long application and the model reject that, consider these three different scenarios. The model first need to give a reasoning why I accept or reject this application. And the second, the model should tell you that how likely this decision is right or wrong, right? It will tell you that, oh, this is a 99%, I'm very certain about this decision, or this is like 50%, and then you should have another expert to verify that decision. And the third aspect would be the model will need to go back to tell you which policy this application violates, so I reject that, or which policy or which piece of text in the application that support me to accept this loan, right? So this is kind of three aspects I think is very important for explainability.
Yeah, of course, and especially in today's world where equality and equity is such a big big standard that is kept in society. Ensuring that we have this mitigation of bias is very, very important. And so, as you spoke about a lot in your research and was very prevalent in your research, data is a big first step in making sure that we're able to mitigate bias and ensure that there is not bias to one specific gender or race or ethnicity. And so, an aspect of your work that we found really interesting is debiasing word embeddings. You did so with gender bias and more. Could you give a brief overview of the methods you found effective in doing so?
Yes, yeah, so debiased word embedding is one of a project that I studied in 2016. So it's already about like 8 years ago. Yeah, so that time we find that the fundamental embedding of the word has this type of bias. Yeah, so just a NLP 101 is like the current way that people build this super large language model is based on some embedding of the word, in the sense that for each word you map them into some high dimensional factor like 300 dimension or 1000 dimension. So then those factors will represent the meaning of the word, right? And then you can actually using some mathematical operation to compute the similarity between this embedding, and that would somehow correlate with how those words have a similar meaning in the semantics. So, for example, you will see a bunch of words, they are synonym, their embedding should be close to each other, and if they are not related, then they should be far away. So that is the way people train those embedding. And then furthermore, they can find that those embedding can carry some direction, that the direction also carry a certain meaning. So we find that, for example, if you have a king minus man, that direction would be somehow similar to queen minus woman, right? So then you can actually make this analogy to show, for example, king is to queen is like man to what, right? And the model should say woman. And you can also do that reverse way, like man to the woman, like aunt to uncle to what, and the model should respond aunt, right? So those are a good analogy, and then you can actually generate a bunch of them, and then people find that it's pretty useful. You can even find something even more interesting, like finding the relationship between CEO and the company, and all these different things. But what we found at that time is that it's kind of not surprising. The model is learned from a lot of corpus, right? Data, right? And the data has a bias, so the model basically just carry those bias in the embedding. And then we find that if you do the analogy like daughter to man to the woman, and the model would generate a bunch of occupation pair, that will also carry this kind of a gender direction. And so some of them are good, like brother to sister, uncle to aunt, but some of them basically carry the stereotype. So for example, you would generate man to the woman, and the top pair, you will have a daughter to nurse, which is kind of problematic. But even you have something more crazy, you have a man to the a woman like a professor to associate professor. So you basically carry the rank. Yeah, and then you can also find that associate professor to assistant professor also in the top here of this direction. So that kind of raised an alarm that the model carry all these different kind of stereotype in a society into this basic understanding of the word. And what happened is that this bias will going to carry over to the later stage. Yeah, so for example, later on, we find that if you do a coreference resolution, which is an NLP test that trying to understand what the pronoun refer to which noun, right? So for example, if you have a sentence, Kai-Wei is a professor at the UCLA, now joining this podcast, to talk to you, right? So then he would refer to Kai-Wei or the professor. So basically, you need to figure out all these words are referred to the same person. Okay, so for this one, we find that the model will also, because of this bias in the embedding, the model will also have a mistake when they're trying to resolve this coreference. So for example, if you have a sentence, say, the daughter want to hire a secretary because he is overwhelming. So in this case, he will refer to the daughter. But if you have almost the same sentence, but now we replace he to the she, you say the daughter want to hire the secretary because she is overwhelmed. So in this case, the model make mistake. The model going to actually assign she to the daughter. I mean, supposedly she should be the daughter, but now the model would actually assign she to the secretary, although it doesn't make any sense semantically. Yeah, so we basically can generate a corpus like that, and you see that the model, because of the embedding problem, and then now they make this kind of mistake. Okay, so that's a kind of a more earlier model, but in a more recent large language model, because you can do reasoning, you can do better on this kind of correct resolution. So this kind of effect is less and less happen, but still the model make a lot of weird mistake. For example, in our recent paper, we show that in the generation model, if you use the model to generate a recommendation later, and there is a non-bias in a society that they usually depict man is more agentic and woman is more communal. So it's more like in the communal usual recommendation later, people find that when you describe the man, you will say they are smart, they are working hard, blah blah blah. And when you describe a woman, they tend to say, oh, this person is nice and is good at communication. So the same kind of bias happens when you use the LLM to generate the recommendation later. So you will see the model has the same pattern, that if this applicant name is a male name, it's likely to say, oh, this is a working hard, blah, blah, blah. And the female would be going to generate the other type of later. So, all these kind of bias will still carry there. So then the question would be that how can you make sure the model can remove this such a bias, right? So for the embedding, that is more mathematical problem. You can actually do some surgery using, the linear algebra to try to remove certain dimension. And for the large language model, the thing can be much more complicated because this is large model, it carry a lot of information. Then now we tend to use more like the reasoning kind of approach, like I mentioned, to trying to see if you can teach a model to follow a certain guideline. Yeah. And in what I'm saying now is basically assuming there's a binary gender, man and woman, but in our world we can have a third gender, and the situation can be even more complicated. So in our research, we also find that the model will likely, if you have a third gender and then you have a third gender pronoun, the model will likely ignore that pronoun resolution, right? And then you usually make mistake on that kind of things. And the thing can always boil down to even how you separate the word at a very, very lower layer, the bias here. So for example, most of binary gender pronoun, he, she, him, will be considered as a word in the bottom layer of the whole system. But then if this is the newer gender pronoun, then usually the model will break that word into several pieces. So that will causing the model even cannot recognize this is a pronoun. Yeah, so all the thing I'm saying is that it's actually not very easy to make the model inclusive and fair. But this is basically the direction that I think that we should push forward for the future LLM.